with me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to my continued coverage of the 2020 NFL free agency period. Now, we have now spilled into week number 2 of NFL free agency, which means things are starting to slow down. Most of the big names have come off of the board, and many of the secondary guys are starting to get deals. So not a lot left out in free agency. There are some names available. However, Jadeveon Clowney still out there waiting for a massive deal. Jameis Winston still waiting for a new home. Cam Newton was just released. He is now looking for work elsewhere. So there's still some guys out there to be had. Obviously, still some players available via trade. Trent Williams is still one of the guys out there available via trade. Andy Dalton still available via trade. So free agency not done by a long shot. Still a lot of guys waiting to be signed. I think the physical portion of this and not being able to actually meet with some teams so they can inspect some of these guys and also talk to them, kind of get a feel for if it's a good fit or not. It's holding up some of these other guys from signing. But nonetheless, free agency has pretty much taken place at this point. And so I kind of wanted to wait before I did this video. I've already done a top 5 free agency winners video that I dropped, and I said I was going to do a top 5 losers in free agency video, and I wanted to wait to see if some of these teams could redeem themselves with a big move here or there. Nothing really materialized. So here we are with my list of the top 5 losers in the 2020 NFL free agency frenzy. So let's get to it quickly. And we start at number 5. And for me, it's the running back position / Jadeveon Clowney. So the running back position, this is the second year in a row the running back position has taken a massive hit. Ever since Todd Gurley signed that big deal and really hasn't been able to live up to the longevity of that deal. He was actually released this offseason, and we'll talk about him here in a second. But ever since he signed that deal, it's kind of went downhill for running backs. Now, Ezekiel Elliott got his money in Dallas, but it took him quite a while to get his bread. But Le'Veon Bell signed a deal last year with the Jets that was less than what he was offered the year prior by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you saw the same thing with Melvin Gordon III. He was offered more money last year by his team in the Chargers than he actually got on the open market this year from the Denver Broncos on a measly, and I hate to say measly because you're still talking about $8 million per on a 2-year, $16 million deal from the Denver Broncos. But when you look at the grand scheme of things, he was offered double figures per annual salary last year from the Chargers, and he turned that down thinking he was going to get more on the open market. Had a very lackluster year last season, and it's led him to this, where he's probably going to have to double dip to get the money that he thinks he may deserve. And by the time he gets to that next contract, he probably is going to be looked at as a back with not a lot of tread left on the tires at that point. So don't know if he's ever going to get that massive deal he was searching for. But for the second year in a row, the biggest back in free agency, or one of the biggest backs, I will say, in free agency, didn't get the money that he thought he was going to get and turned down a deal the year prior that would have paid him a lot more than the deal he actually took the following year. Derrick Henry, it's frustrating because here's a guy that deserves to be paid big guaranteed long-term money, and yet he was slapped with the franchise tag and don't know if there's a deal in sight with him and the Titans. And that's the thing about the running back position that's so frustrating, is that teams can slap that franchise tag on you. It's not a ton of money like it is for other positions. They can get another good year of work out of you and then turn you loose. And so less tread on the tires moving forward. They've gotten as much as they could possibly get out of you without paying you that long-term deal. And they've milked you essentially. So I hate how this has turned out for the running back position. And Austin Eckler is the one beacon of light in the free agency period for running backs. he was able to score a 4-year, $24.5 million deal to stay in Los Angeles with the Chargers. But, Gurley was released. They were looking to trade him. There were no takers. He ends up getting a 1-year, $6 million deal in Atlanta, but he's still making good money between the $7.5 million still due from the Rams and the $6 million in base he's going to get from the Falcons. He's due to make over $13 million this year. So he's still making out pretty well for himself. But again, the running back position, no country for old men. And even when you hit free agency, it's not all that it's cracked up to be. So I think the running back position as a whole, outside of Austin Eckler, it's a big miss for them this free agency period. And then Jadeveon Clowney, I think ultimately he's going to get paid by someone. But I think that with the whole coronavirus and the lack of players being able to actually get into facilities and be tested physically and take the physical and meet with the staff and kind of go over how teams want to use you and how you'll fit and kind of get a good sense of, is this a good place for me? And them kind of getting the same feel, is this player the right fit for us? I think that's kind of what's stopping Jadeveon Clowney from finding a deal. Now, it hasn't stopped a lot of other players from finding new homes. I think a lot more so than that is the health of Jadeveon Clowney. Teams want to know that this guy that we're about to pour, 80, 90, $100 million into is worthy of that health-wise. And so maybe he outpriced himself in the market. Maybe he's not worth what he thought he was worth. Or maybe it's just the situation where teams want to inspect their goods and they're not able to do that at this point. And so a guy like Clowney, who's demanding $20 million or more, wants to be paid like a quarterback. It's really tough sledding for him at this moment. And so right now he's a big free agency loser, because if he doesn't get a deal here shortly, a lot of the big money will have dried up and he will not get anywhere near the money he thought. And he'll end up having to take a 1-year, essentially prove it deal before re-entering the market again next season. And remember, he signed agreed to the trade with Seattle with the understanding that they would not franchise tag him. As of right now, the franchise tag looks pretty damn appealing if you're Jadeveon Clowney. Now, again, I think ultimately he's going to end up somewhere, but as of right now, hasn't found a new home. And with COVID-19 seemingly going to be around for the near future, into the foreseeable future, don't know when Jadeveon Clowney is actually going to strike a deal somewhere in the league. You go to number 4 on this list, and it's a team that I haven't really been that fond of over the last couple of years. Pretty much, let me just be really frank with you, ever since they fired one of their old head coaches that I believed was fired unjustly in Jim Caldwell, it's the Detroit Lions. And I'm not a huge Matt Patricia fan. I don't like what he's doing to this roster. We'll see if it ends up working for him. The first 2 years have not been pretty in Detroit. I feel like they've actually regressed, have the Lions. And my biggest gripe with them in free agency is the simple fact that, how many New England Patriot players can you possibly bring over to this roster before you realize that it's just not working? This is a team that already had a ton of Patriot players already. Whether you're talking Danny Amendola, or you're talking Tavon Austin, you're talking Trey Flowers, you're talking a bevy of guys. I probably missed a couple. They had added LeGarrette Blount at one point. So a ton of Patriots coming over from New England, and they continued that trend again. He wants to be Bill Belichick so badly. He's run some guys out of town like Darius Slay. I remember Golden Tate saying this was not the environment that he signed up for, and he ended up getting out of there relatively quickly. So he's running some of the older guys off. And again, nobody's won anything in Detroit, so I'm not going to sit here and lecture you as if he's running off winners, because that's not what the Lions have produced over the years. But adding Jamie Collins, who flamed out in Cleveland after getting a big deal and had to run back to New England to have success, you're going to, and maybe he knows how to use Jamie Collins. We'll see. But Jamie Collins adding yet another New England Patriot. Daron Harmon trading for him, adding yet another New England Patriot. You add Danny Shelton, yet another New England Patriot. I'm not a huge fan of adding Big V to a long-term deal. I like Big V in a limited role. I love my Big V off the pine, off the bench, in limited activity. You ask Big V to start 16 games. I don't know how that's going to go, but a 5-year, $50 million deal for Big V, it's a lot of money for a guy that could be a question mark out on the outside. You move on from Darius Slay, get a third and a fifth. I thought that his market was better than that, but your back was up against the wall, had to do something. You replace him with Desmond Trufant. Not a huge fan of that move, so I don't think you got better there. I just look at this football team, and I really don't know quite what they're doing. It feels like they're spinning their wheels in place. We'll see what happens. Maybe this is the year they finally put it all together and start winning some ball games. But after the first 2 years under their head coach, Matt Patricia, I have not been impressed, and I wasn't impressed again this offseason. We'll see if this amounts to anything for the Detroit Lions. But as of right now, they're one of my 5 biggest losers of the 2020 free agency period. You get to number 3. It's the Minnesota Vikings, and it's been a rough offseason for them. They lost a ton of players in free agency. And, they don't have a bunch of holes. I don't want to over-exaggerate the Vikings situation, but you move on from Stephon Diggs. He wanted out. That's an unfortunate situation that you had no control over other than you traded him. You didn't have to trade him. He was under contract. But you don't want guys that don't want to be there. And so I understand you making that move. And you actually got a pretty good haul for Stephon Diggs. So it's not like you gave him away like another team on this list that we'll talk about a little bit later on. But the fact remains, you got to replace him. That's a 1,000-yard receiver right there that you're missing. And with the injury situation that you had to Adam Thielen last year, if you have another one of those this year, you got nobody. So your receiver position is pretty much bare at this point. Look, his mama named him Olabisi. I'm going to call him Olabisi. Johnson is going to have to step up for you. He did some good things in his rookie season. He's going to be called upon to do even more in the upcoming season. I think they're going to have to draft maybe one, possibly as many as 2 wide receivers. I thought they could have been a little bit more aggressive in free agency going after a veteran to bring in, but that's nor here nor there. The wide receiver position is bare. The cornerback position, all of a sudden, and it seems like they've drafted first-round corners for the last 27 years, and yet we look up and they lost a bunch of corners in free agency. Trey Waynes went to Cincinnati. He was joined by another Minnesota Viking in Mackenzie Alexander, who also went to Cincinnati. So 2 of your guys gone in free agency. Leaves you, you moved on from Xavier Rhodes, and a lot of Vikings fans are saying, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. And it was just 3 years ago that he was Rhodes closed and one of the best corners in all of football. Well, times have changed, and so now all of a sudden, you're going to have to rely on a couple of young Texas corners in Chris Boyd and Holton Hill to possibly have to step up to a much bigger role. Not to mention Hughes, who you drafted in the first round a couple of years ago, going to need him to step up. You're probably going to have to draft another defensive back or 2. And so that's another position that all of a sudden looks a little suspect for this Vikings football team. They've never been a big free agency team, so I don't want to kill them for the moves that they have or haven't made. Re-signing Dan Bailey, who isn't dangerous Dan Bailey. He's just dangerous now. And franchising Anthony Harris because you didn't want to lose him, eating up some of your cap space there. You didn't have a lot to begin with. A lot of these moves are unaspiring. Re-signing C.J. Ham, one of the better fullbacks in all of football. Rashad Hill as an offensive tackle coming back. You're able to get Michael Pierce along the defensive line because you lost Linval Joseph in free agency. So this is a team that I look at and I'm saying I'm not quite sure if they're going to make a return to the postseason next year or not. Obviously, things could change. If they stay healthy, they're still a dangerous team with a ton of talent. But you look at their football team, they need a defensive end opposite of one of the better young pass rushers in all of the National Football League in Danielle Hunter. They're going to need a lot of stuff. And I don't know if they're going to be able to get all of it via the draft. But that extra first-round pick certainly does help if you're the Minnesota Vikings. But to me, losing Stephon Diggs, losing all of those corners, having so many glaring holes at receiver, corner, and defensive end, right now a little startling and troubling for me if I'm the Minnesota Vikings. They come in at number 3. You go to number 2, it's the New England Patriots. Look, you lose Tom Brady, and that's 2 decades worth of winning, 6 Super Bowls, probably another 12, AFC championship appearances. I don't really know what else to say. Maybe it was time to part ways, but at the end of the day, you move on from Brady and then you look me in my eyes and tell me that Jarrett Stidham is ready to assume the role as the guy, or hell, even Billy Ho is ready to go, and I'm going to give you the side eye, a mean, nasty side eye, and I'm going to just wave you off. And right now I'm looking at the Patriots and I'm waiting for them to tell me it's okay, because I don't believe that everything is okay in New England. And when you look at what they've done in free agency, they don't have a lot of money, first and foremost, which was probably one of the bigger reasons why Brady isn't back. That's number 1. But number 2, you look at what they did in free agency. This is a very underwhelming group. And unlike past years where this is okay because you got Tom Brady and he cleans up all of your messes, almost like a dominant free safety that is the last line of defense and erases all of your mistakes that happen in front of him. You don't have Brady as your eraser anymore. So signing Damiere Byrd at wide receiver doesn't move the needle like it used to, okay? Having Bo Allen on a 2-year deal, or signing back Devin McCourty, or, franchise tagging Joe Thuney, or, bringing back Devin McCourty, or signing Danny Vitale to a deal as a fullback. None of those deals get you excited if you're a Patriots fan. And at some point, you were going to have to turn the page. I just don't know if this was the right offseason to do it. But nonetheless, you lose Brady. You lose all credibility. And I know you still got Bill Belichick, arguably the greatest head coach in NFL history, still there. But I'm not sure if this, first of all, this was a joint venture, Brady and Belichick, the B&B winning factory. All right. I don't know if one had a bigger role than the other. I just know they both had a huge hand in the success the Patriots have shared over the last 2 decades. You remove one of those guys from the equation, and I think the other one may struggle. And I'm looking at this roster. It is not appealing. And now these signings don't make me feel any better. The Patriots are in a world of trouble. It was bound to happen at some point. I think it's finally happening. Now they check in at number 2, and my number 1 team, you already know who it is. It's the Houston Texans. And look, they're going to continue to head up this list as long as Bill O'Brien is the acting general manager. Someone has to come and take that power away from him. All right. It's like a kid in a candy store that just continues to shovel down boxes of sugar. It's not going to end well. Someone's got to take the candy away from that kid and remove him from the store. Someone's got to take that power away from Bill O'Brien and remove him from the Texans organization, because as I mentioned before, he's tearing this team apart. And it's not pretty in Houston. DeAndre Hopkins was traded for a cold hot ham and cheese sandwich, a juice box that is half full with no straw, and an apple that is coreless. And I honestly don't know what the rationale was there. We heard rumors surrounding what DeAndre Hopkins potentially wanted in terms of a new deal, new money. We heard about this crazy conversation that did or didn't take place. I believe it did take place. It doesn't matter. You don't trade this guy for anything less than 2 first-round picks. I mean, we saw the haul that Odell Beckham Jr. was able to bring back for the Giants. That's what this deal should have looked something like. Not the garbage that the Texans got in return for DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, it was highway robbery. And yeah, look, David Johnson isn't minced meat. He's a quality NFL running back. And I still think he's got some good years left in front of him. But there's no way that he's worth not getting a first round pick out of the deal. It's just not an even trade here. They got fleeced, did the Houston Texans. Not to mention, your star quarterback is looking around and he's saying, what the hell is going on around me right now? It's not a great position for Deshaun Watson to be in, and he quoted a very apt Drake line on Twitter, talking about dynamic duos splitting at the seams, doesn't know who's playing for what team, you know what I mean? Like, he understands that he just lost the best receiver he could have been coupled with in DeAndre Hopkins. And I just feel like if I'm Deshaun Watson, if Bill O'Brien's here when my deal's up, I want out. I want to go somewhere else where I feel like I'm in a stable situation, because it's not stable in Houston. Their free agency period was marred. Nothing else they could have done trumps that nonsense that they did there. So even if some of the moves they made during this period were solid, which they weren't, it would have been overshadowed by that trade. Randall Cobb, getting in Houston is a solid move. He's still got good football left in him. Getting Darren Fells back on a 2-year deal is solid. But, that deal there, the Eric Murray deal, is not a good deal. Overpaid for him. Bringing back Bradley Roby, I don't have any problems with that. But obviously, the elephant in the room is the DeAndre Hopkins trade. You got worse as a football team because of that move, not better. And, the one thing you could hang your hat on offensively is that when you were struggling, even if he was double covered, you could still throw it up to number 10. Now that's gone. And remember, you can't count on Will Fuller to stay healthy. He's never been able to stay healthy. And so at least you always knew Nuke was going to show up and suit up. No matter what, he was going to be out there gutting it out and giving you a chance. Now you don't have that. Randall Cobb, he hasn't seen a hamstring injury he hasn't liked in his career. You all right? So he's not going to play all 16 games. I can assure you of that. Randall Cobb will miss at least 2 to 4 games, if not more, this season. There's no Nuke to fall back on. This team is in trouble, I believe. This could finally be the year, and I say this every year, whether it's the Clowney deal or it's the deal to get Laramie Tunzel and Kenny Stills last year and all the draft capital you gave up there. Whether it's one of those stupid deals or this one here, we talk about how the Texans eventually are going to feel the sting of these moves. Maybe this is finally the offseason that they feel the sting of all of the bad moves made by Bill O'Brien. At some point, it's going to catch up with them. It hasn't yet, which is why Bill O'Brien is still here, because they continue to make the postseason. They won a game this past year. And as long as they continue to get to the postseason, win the division, and have a shot, he's going to continue to be the Texans' GM and head coach. But if they've got one bad season in them before I think heads will roll, this may be the year after the stupid move of trading away DeAndre Hopkins. We'll see what happens, but that's my list of the top 5 biggest losers of the free agency period. You tell me what you think. Who are your biggest losers? Did I get one? Did I get them wrong? Did I get them right? Do you have a different number one? So looking forward to reading your comments on the teams that whiffed during this free agency period. And it's not just the signings, keep in mind, it's the players that you lose as well. Some of these teams lost a lot of good quality players this offseason to go with the fact that they didn't replace them in free agency. I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage it could be. Until next time, I'm signing off. You guys have a good one. I'll talk to you later. Stay safe. Louie T Network.